In the countryside, particularly where we've got a bit of shelter from the breeze, but on the whole not desperately cold to take us into Sunday. So early showers clearing away from southwest England first thing on Sunday morning, and then a lot of dry weather around once again through Sunday. Sunny spells developing quite widely. The odd shower for northern England, southern Scotland. Still quite grey and misty for the far north of Scotland, but the majority of Scotland will see a fine day. And in the sunshine, and particularly if you're out of that breeze, 17 or 18 Celsius is quite possible. Cooler along some North Sea coasts. Now, high pressure stays in charge, increasingly so into the new week, which means a lot of dry weather around, variable, at times large amounts of clouds, so it won't be wall-to-wall sunshine. But in that sunshine, still pleasantly warm. Take care.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Were seeing us on the floor in the gallery.
We're on, that's why.
Well, we could. OK, because we never see that.
Where did you grow up and what did your parents do for a living?
Well, I am a product of the Union. I was conceived in Cardiff. I was born and I grew up in Scotland and then back to Cardiff. My mum was a hairdresser. I had a salon before my brother and I were born, but then after that she did hairdressing in the house, or she then went and did a mobile business. And my dad worked in insurance. He was a manager for a big insurance company. Hence why he was living all around the country.
Were you the first in your family to go to university?
I was, yes. I went to Exeter University. That's where I really cut my political teeth.
That's when you became a Conservative, when you were a student.
I was.
Unusual.
I joined the first week I went to Exeter. I was sitting in a corridor waiting to be interviewed for the university magazine, and I started talking to this young man who was doing the same, and he told me after our conversation that I was a Conservative and I should join Exeter University Conservative Association, and he was going to be chairman, and that was one Robert Halfon.
Really?
Yes.
My goodness, imagine if you'd been sat in that corridor with one Jeremy Corbyn, how things could have been different.
Who knows, who knows? No, but
were your mum and dad Conservatives, do you know?
Yeah, very much. My family was always really into politics and current affairs to debate and discuss. And I remember going every Saturday round to see my paternal grandparents, and my grandfather, I can still remember him saying, "Now listen here." That I remember the miners' strike. I remember my father saying, if Thatcher gives in to the miners, I will give up on her. But there were people who really believed in Thatcher.
Where did you grow up and what did your parents do for a living?
Well, I am a product of the Union. I was conceived in Cardiff. I was born in London and I grew up in Scotland and then back to Cardiff. My mum was a hairdresser. I had a salon before my brother and I were born, but then after that she did hairdressing in the house, or she then went and did a mobile business. And my dad worked in insurance. He was a manager for a big insurance company. Hence why he was living all around the country.
Were you the first in your family to go to university?
I was, yes. I went to Exeter University. That's where I really cut my political teeth.
That's when you became a Conservative, when you were a student.
I was.
Unusual.
I joined the first week I went to Exeter. I was sitting in a corridor waiting to be interviewed for the university magazine, and I started talking to this young man who was doing the same, and he told me after our conversation that I was a Conservative and I should join Exeter University Conservative Association, and he was going to be chairman, and that was one Robert Halfon.
Really?
Yes.
My goodness, imagine if you'd been sat in that corridor with one Jeremy Corbyn, how things could have been different.
Who knows? Who knows? No, but
were your mum and dad Conservatives, do you know?
Yeah, very much. My family was always really into politics and current affairs to debate and discuss. And I remember going every Saturday round to see my paternal grandparents, and my grandfather, I can still remember him saying, now listen here. That I remember the miners' strike. I remember my father saying, if Thatcher gives in to the miners, I will give up on her. But there were people who really believed in Thatcher.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
You're the first in your family to go to university, so wherever challenges your childhood presented, it didn't stop you going to university. How did you find it?
Never felt like a student. I was always like a townie who was doing a degree and a little bit apprehensive about it. None of my friends really had gone to university. They're all trained as plumbers and electricians and that kind of thing. And it was completely not what I expected, a lot more down to earth, and I studied politics, so you can decide whether that was useful or not.
You say you played hard and you worked hard, you did your schoolwork too. You get into Oxford.
Yeah.
Wow.
I know.
But I just was like a fish out of water, like for most of it, to be honest. Although I did make some really good friends there.
Why were you a fish out of water?
State educated, northern girl doing science, and the work is really, really hard. It's completely different. What I realised was everybody else had had a lot of coaching, a lot of extra tuition, a lot of support. There was no teaching, really. It's just like, here's an exercise book, get on with it. Crushed my confidence immediately, which, having gone from being this sort of clever, like, oh, you're out of 2,000 kids in this sixth form college in Manchester, we want you to sort of apply for, I was the only one who got in out of that, to basically being made to feel like I was totally thick, you know, is quite crushing.
Did your parents separate when you were young? Do you know your dad?
They separated when I was 10. My father left home for, strangely, with a woman round the corner. I have to say, it's probably it made things more difficult financially, but also it also made me probably appreciate what I've actually had, what I then had in the future, so to speak.
When you get abuse on Twitter or wherever, does it ever make you stop and think, am I right? Because this is quite a barrage.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm one of these people who occasionally likes to stick my neck out with things. Some can say that's being a little populist or deliberately controversial. Been accused of making it as clickbait before, for example, that kind of thing. But I mean, these are all things that I do genuinely believe in. And I always say that, you know, if you don't believe something, don't say it.
Has it ever become more than just social media abuse?
I think where it crossed the line for me is when they start making comments about your family or threats and so on. And I think after I made the comment about taking the knee, I had one particularly unpleasant message that was sent to me. And it said basically about kneeling on my children's necks until they were dead because they wanted me to feel that pain. I had to speak to my wife about that and brief her beforehand just to say, look, please don't get upset with this. Don't take it too personally. It's just idiots on a keyboard. It's not going to happen in real life. But I think sometimes people forget in terms of the security we have. My house, you know, it's been fitted with panic alarms and new locks and everything. And in my case, it was just a threat. The police dealt with it. They were great and so on. But it just does make you worry in future that something actually bad could happen.
You described Facebook as a morality-free zone.
I was being unkind to them that day, I think. Yeah. Facebook is a bit of a cult, let's be honest about it. I mean, it just appears to have a different agenda, in fact, than the other social media companies. And they have a huge impact on society, so therefore, they do need to engage properly with political process. I would like to see them take the approach that I do think some of the other ones are taking. We don't want to see society crumble. So therefore, what we need to do is we need to work to ensure that our platforms are still free, but at the same time, they still have at least an understanding of the social harms that can happen and proper processes in place in order to combat those. Facebook needs to come a long way towards that, and they're not doing it yet.
Lucy, would you like to lead your party one day?
I don't think I would. No, not really. I think the cost on one's actual life would just be far, far, far too great, to be honest. As women, we do weigh up those costs a lot more, the cost to our family, the cost to our lives. I think as women, we do generally, we wear that responsibility is weighted on us a lot more.
The Tory women seem to, I mean, come on, because they've done better, they've done better, considerably better than the Labour Party.
I know, but to be fair, there is I'm not being disparaging about it, but there is a sort of a different sort of culture with maybe people who are a bit posher about boarding schools and nannies and things like that. It's not quite the same as, you know, trying to pair up the socks and deal with the homework.
Just start by telling us, Andy, in a nutshell, what is car share?
Easiest way to describe car share is like an Airbnb equivalent for cars. We enable car owners who have a car they're not using very much, or two cars, the second one being not used very much, to be able to share and rent those cars out to other people who live nearby. We call them renters. The renters can then access those cars through an application and open the car simply through the phone. So we enable owners to share cars and rent them to renters.
So it's connected to the car and it's showing you exactly which car it is.
Yeah, so this is, I'm now in rental.
Yeah.
As I get closer to the car, the phone connects to the car through Bluetooth. So there's no signal required, no phone signal.
Okay.
So that's all eradicated. This is now Bluetooth into the car.
Okay.
The functions to unlock and lock the car are now live. So if we unlock the car, you'll see it flash, hopefully. That's unlock.
Wow.
That's just unlock the car. So I'll get in the car now. Car's open. Off we go.
Wow. All through your phone?
Yeah.
We store, pick, pack and post on behalf of e-commerce sellers. So the guys that you buy from online, particularly in the last couple of years, you know, people have been stuck at home buying from people online. We actually ship that stuff out.
So if you make stuff in your garden shed and sell it online, Hubu can take care of all the logistics, all the packaging, all the difficult stuff that really stops businesses from growing.
We can. We're unique in doing it for a much broader range of clients. Someone's always done that. They've always been fulfillment companies, which is what a company like ours is called. But they've tended to work with big clients, clients that have relatively few items and that ship them in huge volumes. We work with clients of all sizes, complex clients, you know, clients that sell secondhand or vintage, small clients, people that do sell from their bedroom, so a really broad range.
I know you're also very keen to stress the environmental implications of what you're trying to do here with car share.
They've proven that for every one car shared, it can take up to 10 others off the road, which means that 10 other cars don't need to be produced or replaced if others are saying, look, I seldom use my car. Do you know what? I don't want to replace it with another vehicle. I'm going to use a car sharing scheme like car share to access cars when I need them. So that's a big deal, actually, taking that number of cars.
Welcome back. It's good to be back. You're watching the Saturday Selection on GB News with me, Esther McVeigh, and Philip Davis. Coming up on today's show, now you may have heard of NIMBYs, not in my backyard, in terms of house building, but a new movement of YIMBYs, who are, yes, build in my backyard, because they're desperate to get on the housing ladder. Well, we'll be speaking to two of them a little bit later on. And we're constantly being told about the cost of living with rising fuel bills, so we thought we'd help by finding someone who's very nifty at looking after his pennies. He'll be joining us later. And it's Happy St George's Day. We'll be live from Trafalgar Square with the celebrations that are kicking off in true English style.
So back by popular demand with his take on the week's papers, we've got celebrity chef and TV presenter Kevin Woodford. Kevin, welcome back.
Thank you. Good morning.
What's been catching your eye this week and getting your juices flowing? And
my juices have really been flowing this week, right? So there's this young guy. I've got him down. I'll tell you who he is in a moment. I've got this guy down, identified him as being possibly a cross between an attention-seeking child and a petulant young guy keen to make the extra dollar. His new title now is he's the mighty Queen Protector. This is him, Prince Harry, 5,000 miles away from Her Majesty, and yet his role, in his eyes, is to make sure that she's protected. She's got the right people around her, right? And I'm sure she must think, well, what he's going to do, who's he going to protect me from? Because really what I want to be protected from him. Don't you think? Really,
certainly from Meghan, anyway.
Oh, from both of them, in my view. I mean, this is the guy, honestly, God. I mean, he left the UK, for goodness sake, and bless him, he's a young man, but I thought, OK, I understand it. The media it can be annoying and it can be sort of, intrusive. So he left us. He went to the USA, didn't want to be involved in the media, so he signed a multi-million-pound contract with Netflix, Spotify, all sorts of different companies.
Because he wants to be anonymous and he doesn't want to be in the media.
Correct. And his mantra, which I absolutely love, his mantra is, right, and it's a dangerous one, he says, because there's a risk of him burning out with this, but his mantra is he wants to make sure that this is a better world for his kids. And he points out on an NBC interview that his kids are little people. Now, we didn't know that, did we, really? You don't know children are just little people, but he does. He's the court jester. he's got the Queen giggling apparently, and I'm sure she rolled in the aisles when he slagged her off for being a bad mother.
I haven't brought my grandchildren. She must have been laughing there, mustn't she?
Oh, she was in hysterics.
Yeah.
She was falling off a throne.
The bit I like about it best of all is he said that, you know, in this sort of typically pious way, you know, I want my children to be brought up in a much more equal society. He got a £100 million contract with Netflix. I mean, what kind of an equal society
honestly,
is that?
It's a complete and utter farce. I just think the guy, just go back to the States, quietly live your life, and just leave us alone, Harry. If you're watching, do us a favour. Come on, mate.
And there is that, and the other, because it's all obviously in today's papers as well. As you said, he's looking at money to get from Netflix, and he's also wearing a little cap now with the Archwell brand on, because he could be selling that as well to add to the coffers, whether that's for charity or whether that's him. But can I just ask you, is this a coincidence or not? They've been parading all around the world talking about their deal with Netflix.
Sure.
What happened to Netflix this week? Lost 200,000 subscribers, and the share price crashed. Was that because the Queen and Charles and Kate were rushing to cancel their subscriptions?
And me. And finally, just one final thing on this, right? So I thought Invictus Games, well done, Harry. That's fantastic. And if somebody put him up for that, because that was a really good thing for him to do. And full credit. But the fact that Netflix are following him around, filming everything for a documentary, for a full series, another couple of £1 million in the bank. Good luck to you, lad. Yeah. That's my knighthood gone. You do realise.
Yeah, well, mine went a long time ago, I'm afraid, Kevin. But, this week's big political story, obviously, has been about Boris being referred to the Privileges Committee over Partygate, and it's all here on page 10 of the Daily Mail today, actually, about Boris being braced for a second fine over Number 10's Bring Your Own Booze garden party. Now, I think this is an interesting one. Obviously, you know, on any general level, it's unacceptable for the Prime Minister to be caught flouting the rules he imposed on the rest of us. I mean, you know, that is unacceptable. I mean, I think the fine he got for the birthday was harsh, if I'm honest. I feel that was harsh. I mean, they were in work. It was 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Somebody had brought a cake in and they sang Happy Birthday, do you want a piece of cake? And they went back to work. Now, I reckon that lots of workplaces probably were in breach of the rule, if that was a breach of the rule. And I think it was harsh because actually what happened on that day was actually reported in the Times newspaper at the time. And nobody blinked an eyelid about it. You know, it said Boris stopped for a piece of cake and everybody wished him happy. Literally nobody said a word. The journalists didn't say anything, the public didn't say anything. This is about, it seems to me, the people with hindsight now, they went through 2 years of misery after that and made massive sacrifices, and now they look back on that event in a completely different perspective to how they looked at it when it actually happened at the time. So I feel Boris was probably harsh to get a fine, and Rishi Sunak was definitely harsh. He turned up to get to a meeting and got a fine just because he turned up to the meeting at the wrong time. Now, the thing is, though, is that you can say that's harsh. But what happens, as the Mail are speculating today, if another fixed penalty notice lands and then another one lands? I mean, at what point does this become unsustainable, that you can't literally defend every single one? And I think that, you know, it's
and the next one will be harsher because this was where it was Bring Your Own Booze.
Exactly, I think
this is getting more tricky now because these could be parties, so this is much more difficult.
But equally, on the same subject, the Mail here report that the police are being asked to probe again into Keir Starmer's beer and pizza night during the lockdown, when he was photographed through the window with a beer and a pizza and all the rest of it. And it says here, actually, when the images emerged in January, Sir Keir Starmer said, "We stopped for something to eat and then we carried on working. No party, no breach of the rules." Well, presumably the Prime Minister could have said exactly the same thing about his birthday cake. It's very difficult to see what the difference is. So I wonder, you know, now that Boris has been referred to the Privileges Committee, are the Labour Party going to say, and all the critics of Boris, well, we'll leave it to the Privileges Committee now and we're happy it's being looked at by them? I suspect not. I suspect this is going to keep rumbling on, and after the local elections, if more fixed penalty notices happen, I suspect Boris's position is going to become very, very difficult. What do you think?
Well, I feel sorry for Boris in that respect, and I agree with regards to the birthday cake. I mean, and I think the whole process now. From a non-political person, right? I sit and I watch PMQ, and I hear the left hammering into this, and yes, there's an argument that has to be put forward, but for goodness sake, we've gone through COVID for 2 years, and I think we've been reasonably well guided on that. We've got the Ukraine situation going. I just think we've got the economy all over the place. I just think we've got so many major issues at the moment that I sometimes think I just wish Keir Starmer would, throw a line in about it, but then for goodness sake, move on and let's deal with some of the issues that really, really worry this country.
And I kind of think this was what sort of was happening all week. As you say, if it starts to be such a big distraction that Boris Johnson can't do his work, then it's difficult, and this is where people are saying, where do we go next? And that's why the opposition will keep thundering this, asking every questions at PMQ, putting urgent questions in front of the House. But was he right to go to India this week? People ask about Boris Johnson. Absolutely, because he's got to get on with his day job. That was all about free trade agreements. That was all about jobs and investment in the UK. But the thing which was a big political issue during the week was this vote. Would he go to Partygate? Would his own backbenchers say, would he have to go to the Privilege Committee? Would his own backbenchers stick up for him and say absolutely not? And there wasn't. There was a feeling, yes, he's apologised, yes, he's done other things, but it's still rumbling on, and the backbenchers thought, no, Boris, you're going to have to now go to the Privileges Committee. There is an issue here. You are the best person to clean it up. Go to the Privileges Committee, and that's why the backbenchers felt that's why it was nodded through and the Labour motion went through, which is he had to go to the Privilege Committee, and that is rightly so.
Absolutely. But I think it's a shame also, I mean, there's a criticism, isn't there, with regards to when he goes to the backbenchers with you guys, 22 committee, and apparently the argument in the press is that he goes there and he's very light-hearted, he's joking, and he doesn't treat it as serious as he did in the House of Commons.
Well, they're private meetings, so we couldn't possibly comment on those. But thank you very much indeed for joining us. Thank you.
Now, latest opinion poll show Emmanuel Macron is on track to win the French presidential election against his contender Marine Le Pen.
Macron and Le Pen attempted a final campaign push on Friday, with President Macron telling undecided voters to choose the France that they want.
Recently published surveys show Macron's score to be stable between 55 to 58%, but voters' turnout is expected to be no more than 72%, and that's the lowest since 1969. So our reporter, Paul Hawkins, is in Paris to give us more. But what we want to know is, why is turnout going to be so low?
Yeah, morning Esther, morning Philip. Voter turnout is going to be so low because essentially the calculation this time around, in fact, let's take you back to 2017, the last presidential election. Emmanuel Macron then was a new boy, France's youngest ever presidential candidate from a new party. He was anti-establishment, virtually no political experience. A new boy coming in, and it galvanised the French to come out and vote for someone who was not from the two traditional French parties, the Socialists and the Republicans. After 5 years of Macron rule, he can no longer claim to be the outsider, to be the new boy, to be the anti-establishment figure. A lot of people have been unhappy, particularly on the left wing of politics in France, about Emmanuel Macron's presidency. He is right-wing when it comes to economic policies. He's very pro-business. To give you an example, he wants to raise the pension age to 65, which has caused a lot of upset amongst a lot of people here in France, and he's had to row back on that in order to try and regain some of that left-wing support. You saw the Gilets jaunes protests when he tried to hike up tax on fuel and dealt with those protests in quite a confrontational way, some felt. So a lot of people have become disillusioned with Macron. And that is why, effectively for them, they don't like Macron, but the choice is Marine Le Pen, who is seen by some here in France as far-right, who is seen as divisive. She has policies such as wanting to ban the hijab for Muslim women in public, and then she also has a policy called Priorité Nationale, that is giving priority for French nationals to welfare, housing and jobs. So a lot of people are saying these policies are racist, that she is racist. She would say, no, I'm not racist, I am for France. And indeed, on the last day of campaigning, Yesterday she was talking about it being a choice between Macron or France, as in I am France. But President Macron, wary of that abstention, of that low voter turnout, has said, listen, we saw, and I'm paraphrasing here, but essentially what he said was that we saw what happened with the Brexit vote, we saw what happened with Donald Trump, that if you don't come out and vote, then France could be left with a hangover on Monday morning. So get out and vote, if not because you believe in me, but at least because I'm not the candidate. Maybe not the most inspirational, the other candidate. Maybe not the most inspirational kind of message, but it's certainly a practical one. And his message is one of continuity, of security. You've had 5 years of me, so at least you know what you're getting.
Paul Hawkins, thank you very much indeed.
Well, we all know too well about the rising cost of living, so we thought we would look for some clever ways to save money and help lessen the pinch.
And to help us with this is the Consumer Affairs Editor at the Mail on Sunday, Dan Jones. Dan, how bad do you think things are going to get for people?
I think they're going to get worse. I mean, we're already really seeing it. I think we're all noticing it. We're certainly noticing it at home. Everything is getting more expensive. And it's going to get worse because obviously as inflation comes up, it feeds around. It's almost a feedback loop. That's a very scary thing about inflation. So certain prices are going up now, that feeds into next month's inflation, and that forces even more prices up.
And Dan, in your paper today, the Mail today, hard-up families cut back on food and trips, and it's talking about already people are spending less, buying less, volume's gone down. They're talking about in the shops, but significantly worse so, there's been a big drop of people buying online, significantly so. They said it's the biggest drop in 20 years.
Yeah, it's phenomenal because we're so used to people spending more and more money online. It's the future, but I guess we're comparing to a time when we were spending more money than ever online because we were in lockdown. The shops are actually closed for a good part of the last 2 years. But also, and I think we were talking about it earlier, a lot of people go online for boredom purchases, don't they? And I think now when you're bored, you still want to buy stuff, but when you're running out of money, you think, you know, I am bored, but I might just hold back on that
I'll
purchase.
just be flicking and looking. I won't be, as I say, flicking through the pages and looking. I won't be buying. So come on, give us some top tips. What will people be doing? Will they be looking at their monthly budget and saying, ouch, that was dear, coffee, sandwiches? I
think the thing is, that the biggest thing going up for most of us is our energy bills and possibly our fuel for our car. You can't cut that. That's just going up. So sure, you can keep the thermostat down. We're coming into summer. You can't do that. What you've got to do is lots of little saves here and there. You might think that one cup of coffee isn't going to make a difference. But these days in London, £2.50, £3. OK, that's £40 a month you saved. Over the year, you're going to look at £400 or £500. So you do it that way. You think there's a small save there. Let's do that repeatedly. And all of a sudden, that adds up. The other thing we saw in the week, obviously, Netflix is struggling. Lots of people are cancelling. And I've actually thought about doing that. And I love TV. I love my box sets. But, you know, we've got several of them. I'm like, well, why don't I just trim that one back? Come back to it in 6 months. You know, come back to it in the... But that's another... I think ours is maybe £10. Some people are paying £15 a month. So it's lots of little things like that you have to cut back on, and that will add up over the year.
Now, I saw Luke Johnson on Twitter, and it was quite scary. Luke Johnson, obviously an entrepreneur, founder of Pizza Express and former chairman of Channel 4. He tweeted yesterday, I think it was, he put, every single business meeting I attend reveals avalanche of trouble ahead for the economy and households. The lag effect before price rises feed through to consumers mean this is a near certainty. Most have no idea how severe the reckoning will be. So, wow, that's some kind of...
From someone who really knows.
I just wondered, do you think, is there any evidence that any companies are using all of this talk of inflation to actually inflate their prices when they don't actually need to?
Well, as a journalist, we're always very, very suspicious about that. So we are keeping an eye on that. But it's still quite early on. It's very, very hard to tell. I certainly think that some of the telecoms firms are putting their prices up. They put them up by inflation and add a percentage on top. So we're keeping a very, very close on them. But in terms of food, what I will say is supermarkets, we're very... if we notice our supermarkets going up, we will move to another one. So supermarkets have to be very, very careful because, you know, we all know if you go shopping, you know roughly what you spend. And we've been noticing ours have been edging up. And I think if that keeps going, I will now shop around much more than I used to. I think of it a bit like the start of the credit crunch recession. That's when we all started really shopping much more savvy, didn't we? And I think we're going to see a return to that.
I did actually see that consumer confidence has fallen to levels not seen since the recession in 2008.
Obviously, it's for totally different reasons, but it reminds me of it in so many ways in terms of how shops are going to have to really step up, offer great value. And also as consumers, we are smart. If they don't offer us good value, we will go elsewhere.
And I think you're right. I mean, but what we've got to be careful of, if we are stopping going out to eat those meals or going to the local pub, going to the local restaurant, that does have an impact on the economy as well. So that's other people's business, that's other people's jobs. I wrote a list of all of the things that I stopped doing, like you said, stopping your sort of packages, buying less magazines, buying less coffees, getting, instead of the brand foods, getting the sort of the shop foods, and cutting down in car parking costs instead of paying there, walking a little bit further. So it's all these things, but it's money out the economy.
It is.
And then how about apps? There's apps that can help you save.
Yeah, there are. There's some good apps. Mint is a good one. It will pull in a lot of your bank details and credit card details and also allow you to fill in what you spend, so you can use an app. But honestly, often with that, good old-fashioned pen and paper. You know, if you want to just get an idea of what you're spending, just get down to the basics, because when you've got to write it all down, that's when you add in the coffees and the Netflixes and the parking and all of that. That's when you really...
And be honest about it.
You have to be honest.
Get your bank account, that's really honest.
Dan, thank you very much indeed for joining us. I keep saying if people are expected to cut the cloth, why doesn't the government cut the cost of what it does?
Do you want to know one of my biggest saves? Dishwasher tablets, break them all in half. They're so expensive and you only need half of them. I've got loads of tips like that.
Esther's tight. I sometimes think she's got Yorkshire blood in her. Now, we've all seen the heartbreaking images of Ukrainian refugees having to flee their homes due to the Russian invasion.
According to the United Nations, more than 11 million people are believed to have fled their homes since the conflict began.
Many countries are playing their part in helping to rehouse those displaced families, and the UK has been no exception. The Homes for Ukraine scheme saw more than 80,000 people across the UK register their interest to host a refugee on the first day it was launched last month. Well, to find out what it's like to have taken in a Ukrainian family, I'm pleased to be joined by Sally Birch, who took in Natalia and Ilona. Sally, why did you decide that you wanted to go the whole hog and take somebody in? I mean, lots of people say, you know, I think I'll do it, and then they don't. What made you go the whole hog and actually take in 2 people from Ukraine?
OK, so I think on St George's Day, Philip, that's a really good question. So St George kind of embodies English chivalry and doing the right thing. So the weekend the scheme was launched by Michael Gove, I was battling with a pretty horrible bout of COVID and feeling very sorry for myself. But I watched the news on the Sunday evening and it just really struck me that I should try and do something. Now, doing something and thinking of doing something are 2 separate things. So on the Monday, I determined that I would do something. So I made the decision to reach out and try and hook up with a family in the Ukraine, thinking as a parent that if that was my daughter in that situation, I would hope that like-minded people across the globe would do the same thing. You know, we have a strong tradition in Britain of offering sanctuary to people who genuinely need it. People are entitled to lead free lives and to aim for prosperity. And sadly, the war in Ukraine has robbed people of that ability. And I think it's good that we can try and offer that ability back to them. I live in Bradford, which is the 2nd largest Ukrainian community in the UK. Most people don't know that. Outside of London, it is the 2nd largest. And we are a city of sanctuary. So it felt incumbent on me to do the right thing.
And how did you find the process? I mean, obviously there was lots of criticism about how the process was really slow. How did you find the process, and how did you match yourself up with Ilona and Natalia? How did that work?
OK, so in terms of the matching, it's a bit like the world's worst online dating. So the social media have done a brilliant job. I know they get a lot of vilification, and rightly so, but in this instance, social media has been a godsend. So I reached out with my details on that Monday, and Natalia and Ilona reached out to me, and we had lots of chats that day online. We did a video call that evening. We decided that we were compatible. And so the following day I submitted 2 visa applications. So I think, you know, in the online dating world, we went from first date to marriage in 24 hours, which I think is quite successful. But in terms of the process, I understand the criticisms and I felt intense frustration at the process being seemingly very slow. However, these things have to be done in the right way for the protection of everybody. So not just for the protection of Ilona and Natalia, but also for the protection for the hosts as well. So the checks are essential. I think with anything like this, it's about managing expectations. So a lot of people heard talks of 48-hour turnaround. Well, realistically, with something like this, that's never going to happen. So I think expectations needed to be managed better. And also some more human touch points. So appreciating this was set up probably so quickly and so expeditiously, but the process of communication in terms of where you were in this kind of funnel of the application was pretty poor. But the intent of the UK government is perfect.
Sally, I can see that Natalia and Ilona are there. So can I ask them, what was the situation that you left? What's it like now to be in the UK?
Well, we left our homes because of the war, of the invasion, and we just didn't know what is going to be with our country, with our lives, with our homes, with our families, and about how it's gonna end, when it's gonna end, what life will it gonna be, and it just I don't know, we don't have the choices because it's every day it's getting worse and worse. The news are getting so I can imagine how it's. I'm sorry, my English is not very good.
Yeah. I'm listening to how you're speaking there, and I can see that in a way you're still grieving for Ukraine. How are you adjusting here? What are the things that you've got to do to be able to really get on in the UK? And does Natalia speak that much English? I mean, that's another thing, language barriers.
Yes, Natalia is speaking Polish, and I'm speaking English a little bit. So when we left our home, I'm from Kiev, and Natalia is my cousin. She is in the central Ukraine, but we were in the Kiev at that point, at the time the war started, and it became more disturbing. So we decided to go to our grandparents, and as she knows Polish, we decided, and I'm a little bit in English, we decided to go to the Polish-speaking country or English-speaking country. But the English-speaking country is Canada, USA, Australia, is far away. And Warsaw was, the Poland is overcrowded. So we decided to pick the UK because of its simply visa application. We met the Sally, and she took all the commitment. We didn't have to do anything. We just gave her our documents, and she solved everything. Because the language barrier and the
Sally's your new mum.
Yes, she's amazing. She got it all. Like we didn't have to worry about nothing. Just how to get to the UK, and even this she also helped us. She get us an accommodation at the Poland because, as I was saying, it was overcrowded, and the Polish people are so supportive. They do a lot of help. They feed us. They make a lot of humanitarian help. They got a lot of clothes because we left our houses and we didn't know how much long is it gonna take. So we didn't take any clothes or any shoes or any food. And
Natalia, you're very welcome in the UK. We hope you enjoy your stay here, and obviously we hope things get better in the Ukraine for you soon so you can go back and meet up with your family. And Sally, thank you so much for what you're doing. You and many thousands around the country, we're all very proud of what you're doing, so thank you.
Oh, imagine that, leaving your home no clothes, you don't know how long it's going to be.
And your family behind.
And your family behind. But, you know, they found a good one there with Sally, haven't they? Oh, now the pandemic is over and all lockdown measures have been removed. So why are so many care homes still enforcing COVID restrictions? More in a moment.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to the Saturday Selection with Esther and Philip. Have you got a couple of GB
views? Sue says this Partygate obsession is really getting on my nerves. Everyone seems to have forgotten that Boris was very seriously ill with COVID himself and his family could not visit him. Had he not thankfully recovered, he could have been one of the poor souls who died alone in hospital. And Mark says, to save on electric bills, get yourself a washing line and forget the dryer. Hardly any of our neighbours have a good old line anymore. Well, it's a fair point.
It's a fair point, because I used to always, pin them out with, my grandma and my mum. Nobody does that anymore, do they?
But Mark, we like that one. That was very good. Now, with the pandemic seemingly at an end and all restrictions having been scrapped, many care homes across the UK are still enforcing COVID-style measures.
Well, I'm joined now by the actress Leandra Ashton, whose mum was briefly arrested back in 2020 after trying to take her 97-year-old mother out of her care home. It seems that 2 years later, things haven't really changed. But here is Leandra's mum taking their nan out of her care home.
So let's just make this very clear. My nan, my 97-year-old nan here, who we have taken from the care home because we haven't seen her for 9 months, is now being taken back by force to her care home. My mother has been arrested. My mother is in the back of a car here. She is a nurse. She is a fully qualified nurse who is wishing to care for her own mother. And here we have an incredible use of police time to take my 97-year-old grandmother back into a care home where she is deteriorating, where we haven't been able to see her for 9 months.
Leandra joins us now. I mean, that was heartbreaking there that, Leandra, you went with your mum to visit your grandma, were distressed by what you saw. It wasn't anything planned. You didn't know you were going to do this, but you saw how much she deteriorated, so you took her out of the nursing home. Now, that was 2 years ago. Where are we up to now when we still hear people aren't seeing their relatives in care homes?
Yeah, I mean, Esther, quite honestly, I don't know how relatives are still standing. I mean, it was 9 months of us trying to get my nan out of a care home. And as you can see from that video, the distress was unbearable. the fact that there are still families, thousands and thousands of families up and down the country that still don't have access to their loved ones in care homes, I honestly do not know how they are still functioning. The stress on relatives is unbelievable, as well as the obvious deterioration on those in care homes. So we do have to ask the question, why is this still happening? How is this still happening? From that video, thousands of families got in touch with us, and we've set up something called the People's Care Watchdog. So I am now in a position where I realise that that situation that we were in, unfortunately, wasn't unique. And the evidence that we have now shows that in the same way as then, 2 years ago, we were totally unaware of the legislation that was in place to protect my nan. There's the Human Rights Act, Article 8, Right to a Human Life, the Mental Capacity Act, DOLS, which means deprivation of liberty. We had no idea about these acts, and families still today aren't aware of this legislation that is being repeatedly broken, not just by care homes, but not upheld by local authorities. And we feel like this is where the major problem lies.
And, why aren't people being allowed to see the families? They're hiding behind COVID rules, as it were, that don't exist. Or is it now because so many of the care staff lost their jobs, whether that was due to mandatory vaccination or they just found jobs paying more? Is it about staff shortages?
I think that's a really good question. And as you said, many people were forced to lose their jobs, which put the care sector in absolute disarray when it was already on its knees. So there are staff shortages. However, there have been staff shortages in care homes for many, many years. And I think, again, what a lot of people don't realise is that the majority of care homes in our country are run by private equity firms. Now, these private equity firms have absolutely or very limited experience, clinical expertise, particularly on risk management. So the rules are completely haphazard. They will interpret the public health guidelines in any way they wish to, rather than thinking of what is the benefit, what is the risk versus benefit for this person that is in our care. So what we're finding is that different care homes will implement the rules in different ways. We're finding that the low staffing levels that are in care homes, yes, that will be impacting on the care. But also what we have to remember is when a relative is in a care home, they're not an easy person to be in the care home necessarily, because they're able to see their loved one is dehydrated, their loved one has lost weight, their loved one needs their incontinence pads changing. When we see these things, we raise them, of course, with the care home. And when the care home's objective, it seems to us very often, and from listening to thousands of other families, when their objective is profit, you could understand why some of these care homes may be wanting to keep relatives out and stop them from visiting their loved ones.
For a different perspective, we're joined by Dr. Amar Warech, who is a NHS medical registrar. Dr. Warech, thank you for joining us. I just wondered what Leandra's been telling us about care homes, which lots of people will find quite shocking, I think. Is the same thing happening in the NHS in hospitals? Are people being deprived from visiting their relatives in hospital in the same way?
Yeah, hi guys. Thank you for calling me on the show. I'm an internal medicine doctor working in the West Midlands. I've worked through all the waves of COVID, and really, since day one, the situation has been very similar. And I just want to report how many hospitals are still preventing family and loved ones from visiting patients while they're in hospitals due to the potential risk of COVID spread. And it's to the much to the agony of everyone involved, whether that be staff, families, and patients, all of them.
Why are the NHS sort of hospitals, in the same way that Leandra was talking about care homes, why are they so sort of all over the place on this? I mean, do NHS England not say to hospitals, this is what you must do, and people not deviate from it? Why are we seeing such a patchy situation across the country?
I don't know, actually. I think it's right to call it patchy because some hospitals I've been on recently, they have allowed visitors to come in, but a lot of hospitals still aren't allowing visitors in. I personally think, I don't know what the logical basis is. I think it's completely unnecessary because most relatives now are either fully vaccinated or have had COVID themselves. So they have the antibodies to make the risk of spreading COVID very, very low, and sometimes even lower than staff in hospital who may not be vaccinated, may not have had the virus. But moreover, it's illogical because if hospital staff can wear PPE and work for extended periods of time with patients and at very close proximity, I just don't understand why relatives can't come in, also wear PPE, and they'll be present for much shorter periods of time. And, you know, if need be, we can put them at a distance. So logically, it just makes no sense to me.
And can I go back to Leandra's point about the distress that it was having on family members, not seeing their other family members? I mean, what sort of impact are we seeing there? You know, how is it affecting patients?
Well, right now, what I've seen is a lot of elderly patients stuck in hospital. You know, they often get very sad, very depressed, get very agitated, anxious, because, you know, naturally they haven't seen their relatives. I've been, you know, in places where patients have been in hospital for 6-7 months due to long and complex admissions requiring lots of treatment at different facilities. And throughout that period, they haven't had even one family member allowed to come in. You know, often it would be that I would be working in the ward. The family members would come up to the door of the ward with clothes, food, items like that. But their relative that would be maybe, you know, a few steps away, they weren't able to come in and see them. And these relatives, you know, it was quite desperate for them, really, the situation. At times, they would go to the window, try to look in, you know, try to speak in through the window. I just don't think we have to subject people, you know, through this kind of suffering, especially when it's so illogical, the whole policy, the rationale behind it, especially now that we've had such a successful vaccination program, you know, and that the lockdown policy, you know, when it was required, was very successful. But now the Omicron variant is a lot less potent, and we've got a very, you know, well-vaccinated population. I just don't think these measures are necessary anymore.
And Leandra, I guess, thank you for sharing your story, and thank you, Dr. Amar, for coming on as well. But I'm guessing, is it going to be more about the public taking action themselves and not being so passive as we have been, but actually saying, this is our family member. You wouldn't treat an animal like that. These are human beings, and we want to see our family.
Absolutely, Esther. I mean, I think that's the overall thing that we've realised is, you know, before COVID, I was a very law-abiding citizen. When the rules are damaging and affecting your loved ones, you have to question those rules, you have to challenge those rules. So I think as members of the public, we have to become incredibly well aware of the legislation that is in place that can protect our most vulnerable citizens. And we need to start doing things. We can't expect those in authority to make the right decisions for us.
Leandra, Dr. Amar, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning.
Now, having been locked down for 2 years, most people are wanting to get away on holiday.
However, with many airlines cancelling hundreds of flights per day, will people be getting away at all this summertime? To help us explain what's happening, we are joined by the travel editor for The Independent, Simon Calder. So, what is behind all this holiday chaos, Simon?
Well, the fact that we've had the aviation industry, which previously was absolutely the best in the world, completely devastated by the government's travel restrictions. These have changed very frequently. They were generally much more onerous than any that were used elsewhere in Europe. And as a result of that, airlines saw their numbers collapse to sometimes just 5% of pre-pandemic levels. As a result, so many people left the business. The airlines weren't in the mood for hiring new people. Remember, it's only, 5 weeks since the last restrictions were removed from the UK, and you can't just switch on an enormous industry like that. And so you've got the biggest airlines in Britain, that's British Airways. They've cancelled 72 short-haul domestic and European flights today. EasyJet cancelling about 70 flights a day. And that isn't sort of suddenly a Saturday problem. That is happening every single day. And it represents, depending on how you count it, maybe 15,000 people who bought a ticket who aren't going to be travelling on the flight that they were expecting to.
Simon, we can see that you're in Coventry. There doesn't seem to be many people going through past that departures sign that's behind you. I just wonder what's happening in Coventry.
Well, what's happening in Coventry is that I'm getting a sneak preview of what's called Urban Airport. And the idea is that in about maybe 5 years, you and I, instead of going to the station or getting in the car, we will be going to a building like this, stepping onto an autonomous electric taxi that is going to whisk us to our destination. So you're not going to be strapping on a portable jetpack, but you are going to be travelling from the centre of your city. That's the hope, and that's why they've got this trial on in Coventry at the moment, direct to your destination on a clean, autonomous aircraft, or indeed it might even have a pilot. So it's a little bit of science fiction, which is looking as though it might come true sometime soon, and they've got a multi-million-pound mock-up here. It's going to be properly opened on Monday, so watch GB News for that. But I'm just having a look around. Meanwhile, at airports around the country, of course, many people are getting away on their holidays, but it is proving a problem. And as always with travel, just hope for the best, but be prepared for delays and disruption.
Simon Calder, thank you very much indeed, and enjoy your time in Coventry.
Coming up in the next hour, celebrity chef Kevin Woodford rejoins us to flick through the Saturday papers with us.
Plus...
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
You're watching the Saturday Selection on GB News with me, Esther McVeigh, and Philip Davis. Coming up this hour, it's a cracking weekend in the world of sport, and we're joined by sports broadcaster Aidan McGee to go over the biggest talking points.
And it's a happy St George's Day. We'll be live from Trafalgar Square, where the celebrations are kicking off in true English style.
You won't want to miss any of that, but first, here's the latest news.
Good morning, I'm Bethany Elsey. It's 11 o'clock. I'm in the GB newsroom. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has warned that Russia's invasion of Ukraine is just the beginning, and that Moscow has plans to invade other countries. Journalist and chief editor at Ukraine World, Volodymyr Yermolenko, told GB News NATO countries should prepare for further attacks.
I think the West should understand that this is a big second front, because Ukrainians are fighting on the ground, they are dying for their country, but also for Europe. And it's clear right now that if Ukraine falls, Russia will continue its expansion to the NATO countries.
Meanwhile, the governor of Luhansk says shelling in all Ukrainian-controlled cities in the eastern region is intensifying. UK military intelligence says Russian forces have made no major gains in the last 24 hours, and heavy fighting continues in Mariupol, frustrating Russian attempts to capture the city. New satellite images appear to show further mass graves east of the port city. Ukraine says thousands have died in Mariupol in nearly 2 months of shelling, and 120,000 civilians are still trapped there. Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister says evacuations will start at midday. In other news, Boris Johnson has been warned his party will be punished at the ballot box over Partygate as the threat of more police fines hangs over him. Conservative MP Steve Baker told the Daily Telegraph his constituents are furious over lockdown breaches in Downing Street, and it could hurt the Tories at the local elections on the 5th of May. Number 10 has said the Prime Minister hasn't been fined for a bring-your-own-bottle garden party in May 2020. It's reported several fines have been issued to people who attended that event. UK supermarkets have placed limits on how much cooking oil people can buy due to supply chain problems caused by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Tesco has introduced a temporary buying limit of 3 cooking oil products per customer, and Iceland is rationing sunflower oil sales to 1 bottle per customer. Most of the UK's sunflower oil comes from Ukraine. The British Retail Consortium said the move was a temporary measure to ensure availability for everyone. National statistics show the price of cooking oils and fats is nearly a quarter more expensive than a year ago. Campaigning has ended in the French presidential elections ahead of polls opening tomorrow. Pollsters are predicting the race for presidency is very close, with Emmanuel Macron expected to reach just over half of votes. That's between 55.5% and 57.5%. President Macron has admitted it's a failure for him that his rival, Marine Le Pen, is set to reach a higher turnout than in 2017. French journalist David Chazan told GBNews Le Pen's plans to scrap income tax is appealing to young voters.
Marine Le Pen has economic policies that Emmanuel Macron says simply don't add up to economic sense. He says she'd bankrupt the country in next to no time. And she's effectively offered a huge bribe to the under 30s by telling them that she will scrap income tax for them. They won't pay a penny. And she also wants to make big cuts in VAT.
A gunman has taken his own life after opening fire from an apartment building in the United States, wounding 4 people. The shooting happened next to a school in Washington, D.C. as classes were about to be dismissed for the day. Police say 4 victims were shot at random and 3 were taken to hospital. Washington Met Police Chief Robert Conti said the investigation is ongoing.
We'll get to the bottom of this. We will find out what the motive is. And right now, we do not have that answer. This was very much a sniper type setup with a tripod, and this person, obviously his intent was to kill and hurt members of our community.
Drugs for an overactive bladder could be made available over the counter for the first time. The government is calling on millions of women with the condition to take part in a consultation period. It could lead to the medicine Aquiet, used to treat women with milder symptoms, being reclassified so it can be bought at a pharmacy without prescription. And happy birthday, Prince Louis. Buckingham Palace has released 4 photos to mark the youngster's 4th birthday today. Let's take a look at them. The pictures taken by his mother, the Duchess of Cambridge, show him playing barefoot in the Norfolk sand dunes. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now, let's return to Saturday Selection.
Welcome back to the Saturday Selection with me, Esther McVeigh, and Philip Davis.
So let's get back to our Saturday selection of stories with this week's paper reviewer, celebrity chef and TV presenter Kevin Woodford. Kevin, what's been getting you going today?
I used to feel slightly disappointed when I tried to get a GP appointment and I couldn't get one for 2 days. I don't know whether you recall those days, but I can. And now we find, and it's an ongoing story, isn't it? Now we find in today's paper as well that the UK has the worst reputation now when it comes to getting an appointment right across Western countries. Crazy, absolutely ridiculous. I've found it ironic that when you ring up for an appointment, first of all, you've got to explain to the receptionist what's wrong with you. I always say, do you have a medical background? Will it make any sense?
You're an awkward customer.
Listen, I've become really... No, I have.
I'm shocked. Kevin, I'm shocked by that revelation.
I want to say, yes, I've got a problem with certain parts of my body that I don't want to talk about, but I don't. I resist that. You know, I do resist that. But then you get the doctor, we'll have an appointment with the doctor, telephone appointment in 2 weeks' time. You know, by which time I'm fine.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
You could be dead by then.
Completely dead.
Yeah, if you said I could be dead by then, they'll probably say, well, make sure you cancel your appointment.
But, you know, very briefly, I lived in Spain for a while, in Marbella, and there you could buy a package for, well, today it costs €298 for the year for a thing called helicopter sanitarios. And you could ring up 24 hours a day and an ambulance would come to you with a doctor, even if you had a cold, and he would check you out. Come on. I mean, we are now going towards private health all the time here. There's more and more people sort of, you know, saying to their employers, I need private health with regards to my employment. We're going to see an increase in that and a decrease in what's happening with the NHS. Such a shame, you know?
Well, actually, I mean, the government did some research recently which showed that most GPs are now working 3 days a week. And you know, to get a nice long weekend in there.
That is a long weekend.
That was, you know, that's an official study commissioned by the Department of Health, which showed actually there's been a substantial fall in hours worked by GPs since the pandemic. But I did a bit of research into this, Kevin, and I found this is actually not quite as new as we thought it was.
Okay.
Because in 2018, the King's Fund did some research which showed that the average GP was working less than 3.5 days a week, and only 5% intended to work full-time, and that was a survey of 2,000 GPs.
It begs the question, what are they doing the rest of the time? Now, if it is all paperwork, then there's something wrong there. The medic shouldn't be doing all the paperwork, so we need to do something. But if they're not doing any work, well, it is fundamentally broken as a system.
Absolutely. And didn't the government pledge in the manifesto that by 2000 and whatever, 24, they would increase the number of GPs by 6,000? And they're not going to achieve that. Is that because nobody wants to go into medicine anymore because it's such an easy job? 3 days a week.
3 days a week, they could be. Now that they know that, there could be more people applying.
Come on, Esther,
another story in a total different area. It's got page 25 of the Times. Church prays for a miracle of its own. And it's talking about 2 years ago, churches across the land were closed on Easter Sunday. Their doors were locked, it says, by government decree, but even the priests were banned from entering by order of the Archbishop of Canterbury. They're looking back now and saying, should the Archbishop of Canterbury pushed harder to have kept the churches open, to keep the congregations there, to keep people together? And I was one of those people writing to the government saying, you know what, the church is a place of hope, is a place of sanctuary. Those churches should have been open, and let's be honest, the flocks were never so huge in those cavernous big churches that we couldn't have all been socially distant. But instead, they chose to close and go online. And now they're saying, as attendance has fallen year on year on year, from the 1960s onwards, you know, what is the future of the church? Justin Welby has been there for 6 years. Obviously, its attendance has declined even more so. He's there maybe for another 4 years. But surely the church, if ever there was a space, needs to be opening up and looking to what its future is. You've had COVID and people wanting to come together. You've got a cost of living crisis. Couldn't we be opening the churches for, I don't know, care, support, for sort of learning about how to cook, bring families together? There is a place for the church, but they're not doing it. What is going on?
I mean, even when the churches were open, I mean, my mum goes to church every Sunday. I think there's about 5 or 6 in the congregation. Sure. They weren't allowed to sing hymns. They all had to wear the face masks, even though they were miles from each other in the church. I mean, it's absolutely
you
ridiculous.
had to hum.
You had to hum. You hum the hymns.
Well, I presented Songs of Praise for a few years, right? And I saw the decline with regard to sort of attendances in churches during that time. And you're right, Esther. I mean, the phenomenal resources that are available within the church and the finances to actually help people. And, you know, Welby, bless him, I mean, was it the right thing for him to talk about Rwanda on Easter Sunday? Maybe in his sermon he should have been talking about, you know, bringing people together.
Yeah,
you know?
And I agree with that. I think it's such a wonderful, as you say, space within the community. Think of it now, people do need to, you know, as I said, support with the cost of living, family support, you know, managing your money support, all these things they could do, and it's not happening.
No.
There was, we weren't actually allowed any hymns at our wedding either, Kevin, but that was more to do with Esther's terrible singing rather than any...
In fact, yeah, all the restrictions had been removed.
They were reimposed for Esther to avoid hearing Esther singing.
Yeah, next story.
Sorry.
Moving on quickly.
Moving on very quickly. I'll get punished for that later.
I can tell.
Yeah. Page 3 of the Daily Mail. Terrific photo on page 3 of the Daily Mail. Sorry for anyone who's listening on radio, but get a copy of the Daily Mail to look at the picture. Sorry, Mum, maybe you shouldn't have popped to the loo. 2 small children, 1 large pot of paint. What could possibly go wrong? And mother Hayley Kidd nipped out, and 2 minutes later she returned to find that 2 kids, 4 and 1, had come into the kitchen, climbed onto a worktop, and basically chucked the paint all over the kitchen. Absolutely ruined. I mean, what a terrific picture that is.
It's great.
And I think any parent can sympathise with Hayley and what she went through.
It's a great photograph.
It's terrific, isn't it?
Yeah, been there, got the T-shirt.
Yeah.
And one funny story I saw during the week was the rise of double-barrel surnames. It says that women want to keep their independence. They don't want to give up their name, so they're sort of double-barrelling it. The biggest increase ever, 30% rise. Also said during COVID, women who delayed their weddings had far more time to think what they wanted, how they wanted to be spoken to, or how they wanted to keep the name after they got married. But you're not just having double-barrelled names. We saw that with Brooklyn Beckham when he married the actress Nicola Peltz. They kept it Peltz Beckham. You're seeing now a meshing of names. So you saw Dawn Porter, who married the actor Chris O'Dowd, and it's now O Porter. So it's that sort of meshing of names.
All right,
and do you know what that reminds me of? You know the cars in the 1970s where you'd put the banner and they'd have the names. So for us, Philip and Esther, it could be like Phil Esther.
Yeah,
do you remember that, right?
Yeah,
so that's what we're doing now.
Do you not think there should be, should have been McVeigh Davis? Davis McVeigh? I mean, who's well,
who goes first? I know. I've always thought it's peculiar, for a lady or a girl or a lady, a woman to actually lose her name when she gets married. I've always thought that's strange, So I'm in favour of double-barrelled. And we've all had that on the front of our cars at some point, haven't we? 2 names.
You speak for yourself.
Yeah.
And the little dice, the fairy dice.
But we want a picture of that next time you're on the show.
Getting nothing from me.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Now, we are going to be speaking to some people called YIMBYs next. That is Yes in My Backyard. They want more people to be building in their backyard. We're going to be speaking to them after this break.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's 2 questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Welcome back to the Saturday Selection with Esther and Philip. Now, we've all heard of NIMBYs, the people who are opposed to housing developments in their local communities. But a new movement of YIMBYs are so desperate to get on the housing ladder, they are saying the exact opposite.
According to the Office of National Statistics, the percentage of those aged 25 to 34 who are able to buy their own home dropped from 59% in 2003-04 to just 41% in 2019-20.
Well, we're pleased to be joined by two YIMBYs now. In the studio, we have John Myers, who is the founder of the YIMBY Alliance. And we've also got YIMBY Alfie Robinson. We'll be speaking to him shortly. He's there down the line. So, John, the YIMBY Alliance, why did it happen? How did it come about? And why are you in charge?
Well, I mean, it's not about me. This is an alliance of different YIMBY groups across the country. And young people are losing hope. They're losing hope of ever owning their own home. They're giving up on the dream of having a family. And we thought it's important to get the message out to parents that if they want to have grandkids, we've got to start to fix this. As you say, the number of young people who are able to afford their own home now has dropped precipitously in just a generation. This is a huge problem, and we thought that we needed to do something about it.
And do you think people weren't doing anything? The older generation were looking after themselves, as it were, and then there was definitely a generational divide.
Well, we're trying to build bridges, not have wars with people. Yeah. And, I think there are plenty of ways for everybody to work together and to get better housing, to get better places, to build housing in a way that makes the community happier. And so there's no need to have a divide, one or the other. But there's no doubt that young people have suffered enormously and they don't have the opportunities that their parents or their grandparents had to have a chance at home ownership.
And looking at the cost, the first-time buyer could be over, on average, £250,000, and the deposits is huge, £60,000 odd, and you're renting every month, so there isn't much money left, is there?
Exactly.
I just wondered, John, I mean, to me, housing is the ultimate supply and demand market, and at the moment, obviously, there isn't enough supply for the demand. I just wondered, lots of people seem to just focus on the supply part of it. We need more houses and never really talk about the demand bit for it. And I remember once asking a parliamentary question about how many of the new houses that were planned to be built were for people, for immigration, and it was about 2/3 of them. And I just wondered if you had a view about whether or not, actually, in order to deliver the same outcome, perhaps politicians ought to maybe focus as much on demand for housing as they do on the supply of housing.
Well, I think the demand is important, but I think what we have to remember is even if the population stopped growing, we have nowhere near enough housing for the people who are already here. And there are plenty of ways that we can build housing in a way that adds value for the community, as well as providing the homes that young people so desperately need. So I think that's the easiest way to do things. If you have some grand scheme to change property taxes or something like that, perhaps that might work, but the easiest way to do this is supply.
OK, well, we've got Alfie Robinson down the line as well, because he is a heritage consultant. And so what I'm interested in is what sort of houses or apartments are we going to be building and where, with your heritage consultant hat on? Or not this morning?
The way the planning system works squeezes development into certain interesting areas. So it determines where we do build and where we don't build. And the places that one is allowed to build, the places that are easiest to build, are often quite strange. So to give you one example, which is quite surprisingly common, is that often it's very easy to build a series of housing units that are all detached in rural areas that are next to an existing village, purely because there's less impact, because there are no neighbours to that. It's in a field next to a village. Whereas doing little infill projects where you build even a very high quality structure in an urban setting is very difficult, because you have lots of neighbours and you get a kind of a NIMBY pile-on of lots of people who are objecting to that. And it's seen by the planning system as being kind of high impact. But of course, with these leapfrog developments where people are reliant on cars, it is actually encroaching on the countryside, and so the outcomes are not particularly good. But the planning system as it currently stands is not necessarily very able to distinguish between those two types of project.
When I was housing minister, I was always looking at how we could build more homes, because we desperately needed to. We're talking about supply and demand. And I was looking at in sort of whether it's brownfield sites, whether it was in cities, how do we do conversions, and looking at the size of a property. If somebody wants to get on the housing ladder, was there a way to make a smaller property in a big development that you could share a living room and share various other spaces? That would fit with the cost of living, it would get you on the housing ladder, and prices would be much smaller. How would that fit with your sort of view on nice developments and also what you wanted to get on the property ladder?
Well, certainly I'm in favour of denser development. And this is where you have many units taking up space efficiently. If you look at a street of detached houses, which was very popular in the early 20th century, you think of the Garden City, you think of Letchworth, somewhere like that. Every little alleyway that you see between these detached houses, you add them up and you have a whole house worth of volume of empty space. And this is used to store people's bins. This doesn't create good urban spaces, and so high density developments are a great thing, because they take this wasted space and they convert it into space where people can live. And yes, they are close to each other, but this gives people a chance to start on the housing ladder, but also, of course, reduces rents. And this isn't some, dense housing isn't some totally new alien invention. In the 19th century, one of the most important forms of housing was terrace houses, and people are very fond of terrace houses, particularly if they're built to a high standard.
John, can I come back to you? I would probably class myself as more of a NIMBY than a YIMBY, if I'm perfectly honest, and I seem to spend an awful lot of my time trying to stop Bradford Council from building houses over the green belt in my constituency. And I wondered whether or not NIMBYs and YIMBYs might be able to join forces, perhaps, on something, and that is about protecting the green belt, because that seems to be the bit that gets most of my constituents upset, that the sort of concreting over green fields. And most of the places where these houses are being built aren't providing affordable houses for young people to get on the housing ladder. They're massively expensive and all the rest of it. So could NIMBYs and YIMBYs join together?
Just like we have, because I'm more of a YIMBY,
exactly.
He's a NIMBY. So
could they join together and say, let's protect the green belt, but let's build more houses on brownfield sites that are affordable?
We absolutely have a no NIMBY left behind policy. The positive way forward here is, as we've heard from Alfie, to build more housing in existing urban areas. And there are lots of homeowners who are keen to be able to do more with their property. Polls, for example, so that people support residents on the street being allowed to collectively decide to allow more use of their land if they want, whether that be perhaps an extension or a granny flat or even something more ambitious. So there's lots more that we could do, bringing existing homeowners with us to allow more housing in existing towns and cities. And I think that would help to create a coalition that doesn't, we don't have to fight about.
And that's why I ask about conversions now, obviously of a very high quality and, you know, living standards. But if people aren't going to the offices, if people are saying we can work from home, there's going to be a big seismic shift of the cities. So this would bring the people back to the cities. It would have the footfall so that, you know, the coffees and bars, the restaurants and etc. So it would fill, I don't know, a criteria for so many people. So what about that? Are you, as the 20 and 30-year-olds, which is predominantly the YIMBYs, is that what you're trying to offer up? Solutions and maybe a new type of city centre?
We absolutely are, and sadly, I'm not 20 or 30 anymore, but we are trying to...
Most YIMBYs are,
yes,
though,
very much so. But we also...
You're lucky, John, that's the key thing, that's the important.
We have everyone from 80-year-olds down to students. You know, it's a broad movement, and the key is we can regenerate, we can help high streets that are failing, and we can revive towns and cities by doing this sort of development.
John Myers?
And
You're just going to say something? Thank you very much indeed. I think this is one of the biggest issues facing us, is housing, is house prices. We talked about it last week, that a lot of people, young people, feel disenfranchised in a way because they can't get on the housing ladder. And there was that sort of anger towards people with wealth, and it was fundamentally coming from the whole housing issue. So thank you. May YIMBYs go from strength to strength.
And Alfie Robinson, thank you too for joining us. I guess my take on it is that it's how you get communities to embrace more housing, isn't it? Because at the moment, you know, for a local community, you get more houses. There's no infrastructure put in place. There's no more school places. There's no more doctor's surgery. So for people getting more housing there, it's just a negative.
Yeah. And they'll say that we haven't got a GP surgery, we haven't got the school places, and that has to be put in. And I think that would help the YIMBY movement if we made sure we had that infrastructure.
Absolutely. Right, it's time for the Sports Roundup. Joining us in the studio is sports commentator and broadcaster Aidan McGee. Aidan, big night of boxing.
Are you a YIMBY or an IMBY?
It depends where I am in the country, actually.
Quick answer.
You should go into politics. You should go into politics.
You're getting back to sport.
Yeah, just someone come on.
Come on, who's going to win between Fury and White then?
I think Fury's pedigree is going to carry him through. I think he's going to stand off. He's too intelligent a fighter to get sucked into a slugfest with Dillian Whyte. Dillian Whyte's got plenty of hunger. He's waited for this shot for a long time. Let's talk about the scale of the event as well, Phil. I mean, 100,000 people expected at Wembley tonight. I think 96,000 to be completely accurate. This has been in the offing for some time. He's waited patiently for his shot. I just don't think that he's going to get the chance to get into the ribs of Tyson Fury, which is where Dillian Whyte needs to be. If he wants to get drawn into a fight, I think it'd be a very silly thing for Fury to do. He's got the pedigree, he's got everything he needs to do to win that fight tonight. It's been, as I say, it's been a long time coming, but I think it might be just too late for Dillian Whyte, that's all.
I saw that Fury was quite a short price favourite with the...
well, he would be. I mean, his last his last 3 fights have been against Deontay Wilder, and he's come good in all 3 of those, really, even though one of them was a draw. But I think Dillian Whyte has got... I saw him in 2015 against Anthony Joshua, and he was out of shape. His conditioning was poor. He admitted afterwards if he wanted to get to that next level above, he's going to have to really dedicate himself to the sport. He has done that. He's beaten some good calibre opponents. He's giving away a lot in height. He's giving away about 10 pounds in weight as well. But I think he's probably stronger than Fury. And I think that, but if he gets dragged in, it could be a problem for him.
You and your dad like the boxing, don't you?
We certainly do. My dad is a huge boxing fan, but not as big a fan as he is of Liverpool and the Derby. So how's that?
Well, that's tomorrow, but I think they could be 4 points behind by the time they go into that game tomorrow. I mean, it's a huge game tomorrow for lots of different reasons. Liverpool are going for the title. Everton have got serious problems themselves. They salvaged a late draw against Leicester, didn't they, on Wednesday night, and then Burnley go and win the day after. Burnley are playing tomorrow as well. So there's a huge fight at the bottom there. Everton won their last season when there was no crowd, but different time altogether. Liverpool was struggling at the time. Everton were experiencing that managerial bounce that Carlo Ancelotti gave them, 14 months ago, whenever it was. So I don't see anything other than Liverpool win at the moment. They were just magnificent against Manchester United the other night, I have to say, on Tuesday.
And talking about Manchester United, the bomb threat about Harry Maguire, which is quite extraordinary, isn't it? At his home.
I don't know if it's endemic of the social media age. People think they can just take pot shots. I mean, this went further on than that. I mean, the police were alerted. He was at the training ground and he was told by the police, by Cheshire Police, that they'd received an email saying that 3 different devices had been placed at his home. Now, it seemed unlikely because someone would have had to encroach onto the footprint of where the property is. But you don't take any chances. They really did look around for everything, couldn't find anything. But his two children, his wife, absolutely petrified. And the message was quite chilling. If you don't leave, you're going to die. I mean, this is football we're talking about here. He's on the bench today, apparently, for the trip to the Emirates. They go down at Arsenal at lunchtime today. And you can only imagine what's going through his head. Yeah, he's not playing well, but who cares?
No, it's horrific, isn't it?
Aidan McGee, thank you very much indeed. Still to come on Saturday Selection, we'll be catching up with all the showbiz gossip with Hayley Palmer, and we'll look at Tony Blair's suggestion that 70% of young people should go to university. Anyway, that's all coming up after the latest news.
It's 11:31. I'm Bethany Elsey in the GB newsroom. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has warned that Russia's invasion of Ukraine is just the beginning and that Moscow has plans to invade other countries. Meanwhile, the governor of Luhansk says shelling in all Ukrainian-controlled cities in the eastern region is intensifying. UK military intelligence reports Russian forces have made no major gains in the last 24 hours and heavy fighting continues in Mariupol, frustrating Russian attempts to capture the city. Boris Johnson has been warned his party could be punished at the ballot box over Partygate as the threat of more police fines hangs over him. Conservative MP Steve Baker told the Daily Telegraph his constituents are furious over lockdown breaches in Downing Street and it could hurt the Tories at the local elections on the 5th of May. UK supermarkets have placed limits on how much cooking oil people can buy due to supply chain problems caused by the war in Ukraine. Tesco has introduced a temporary buying limit of 3 cooking oils per customer, and Iceland is rationing sunflower oil sales to 1 bottle per customer. The British Retail Consortium said the move was a temporary measure to ensure availability for everyone. And campaigning has ended in the French presidential elections ahead of polls opening tomorrow. Pollsters are predicting the race is very close, with incumbent President Emmanuel Macron expected to reach just over half of votes, between 55.5% and 57.5%. On TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. It's back to Saturday Selection in just a moment.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's 2 questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to the Saturday Selection with Esther and Philip. It's time to take a look at the week's showbiz news. And in the studio, we're joined by our regular showbiz correspondent, Hayley Palmer. So, Hayley, I'm a celebrity.
Yes.
Get me out of here.
Woo, my favourite programme is coming back. And the exciting news is they're going to have the normal I'm a Celebrity, but also they're going to have an all-stars one. So they're going to bring back the best contestants of all time.
Oh. What, on the same show at the same time?
It's going to be a different one.
Oh,
yes.
Running parallel?
I think they're going to film it just in case there's any problems with, like, COVID restrictions or anything going out to Australia. So this one is going to be filmed in South Africa. It's going to be 2 weeks long. And I just want to know, who are they bringing back? Is it going to be Gillian McKeith? Who's it going to be? It's going to be the ones that have caused a lot of drama, isn't it? So
Would you go on I'm a Celebrity if you were asked? Would you?
No, because I can't even do one night camping, Philip. I can just about do a night in the Versace hotel, but I can't do camping.
Yeah, like it's not comfortable enough. Would you go on? If
I'm being brutally honest with you. No, I wouldn't. And I'll tell you for why. I do not like any of the, eating trials. There's no way am I eating any of that. And then everybody'd hate me because they wouldn't have had their dinner for the night. So best to know what you don't like. But you might watch other people do it, but some of those are just a bit too cruel, I think.
You see, the way I think about it, I wouldn't mind the eating. I can eat anything, but as you can tell by the size of my stomach. But I'm petrified of snakes. Absolutely. I could be Usain Bolt I could beat Usain Bolt over 100 metres if I came across a snake. I would be... But the thing is, I always thought to myself, you know what? They pay you a fortune to do this. And I thought, you go to the trial and you'd think, well, I'm just not doing it. You just say, no, I'm not doing it.
Well...
what happens then?
Well, I think this
You never get another job with ITV.
I'm not likely to get one anyway, so I'm not...
But this year, with the South African one, with the All-Stars one, it's going to be internal voting, so they're all going to vote for each other, a little bit like how Big Brother used to be. So it's not going to be the public voting. So I think that will make it
that will make sure you do it because you need to stay in. Because if you don't do it... No, but...
I want to be out.
But I thought but people want to win. There's a reason they want to stay in. They want to stay in to win.
Madness. I think they haven't thought this through logically. I think if you get the thing and you don't want to do it, just don't do it. And then I can go a night without eating. It doesn't bother me. You wouldn't think it, but I can. And then they won't vote for you to do it again, will they? They're not going to vote for you to do a trial again if you're not going to do it.
So you just get to the destination, and then while everybody is in the camp,
you just need a watertight contract to make sure that you're paid irrespective of what happens.
I don't think they'd be signing you up on this one, Philip, on that basis.
No. I've let the cat out.
That wasn't the only reason, Hayley. So you've been to lots of premieres this week.
I have. It's been a full-on schedule. I went to the press night for Bonnie and Clyde, the musical, which is the new one that's out at the moment. I wasn't that fussed about seeing it, I'll be honest. It is the best thing I have ever seen.
Why? Really?
First of all, the guy that plays Clyde, Jordan Gage, what's his name? Luke Gage, that's the one. He is absolutely phenomenal. He's been in Heathers, the musical, and Juliet he starred in.
Gorgeous or a great singer?
Both. He's... And just wonderful. And there was actually a medical emergency in the audience next to me halfway through. They stopped the show, which I haven't seen happen before, but they continued it, and I was just so engrossed in it. It's running at the Arts Theatre until the 11th of July, so check it out.
And what else have you been? up to? Because you always get the best invite.
Of course. I went to the premiere of Firebird, which you may have seen advertised on all the tube stations at the moment. It's kind of a love triangle, which is out now in the cinema. But also, I've been obsessed this week with The Thief, His Wife, and The Canoe. Have you watched it?
I haven't watched it. I've read a lot about it. I remember it at the time being horrified by what he did, pretended to have died, obviously took fraudulently the money from the insurance, and then how he lied to his children about it. But I haven't watched it yet, but we will.
Yeah, we've got to see that.
Yeah, it's a 4-part series that's been on this week, and my friend Linda and I have been absolutely glued to the TV screens because, you're right, I can't believe he lied to his children. That's the bit that gets me. And really interesting now how she lives her life, because apparently she has rebuilt her relationships with her children and her grandchildren. She lives a very quiet existence. And apparently he lives out in the Philippines and he's remarried.
Is he as dislikable in the drama as you would think he is from reading the newspapers about him? Was there anything likeable about the man?
He's just so fixated that it's all going to be okay. I mean, you watch it and you think, well, surely you know that wouldn't, you're going to get caught out. But I think
he's a fantasist.
Yeah.
And he just thinks, oh, it'll all be fine, nobody will...
Exactly, whereas she's just a sweet little old woman and she just... You know, she seems completely normal, and I felt sorry for how she got swept into it.
Did you understand why she went along with it, watching this drama? Or do you still say, why didn't you stop him? Why didn't you stay on the side of the children? Why didn't rationality, legality kick in?
He said, in the first episode, he said, I will commit suicide if I don't do this. And she felt so bad that I think she just got swept in. But you could see she was like, it's absolutely ridiculous, no way. But then before you know it, she got swept in. And, you know, they both got the same prison sentence in the end. So, God, you can see I've got really into it.
Hayley, you've just gave us a test. This is my weekly test to you. Have you been to see Phantom of the Open?
I went to go and see it, and it's not on anywhere now. I waited too long. I'm going to have to download it. I'm so sorry.
Hayley.
I looked it up, and yeah, I've missed the boat now.
She's hobnobbing with all the latest. Latest releases. She'll actually have to catch up on this one video.
Exactly. Hayley, thanks so much for joining us.
Today, it's St. George's Day, where English people celebrate our heritage, our traditions and our values.
For many, it will be a day of flag waving and festivities, especially down at Trafalgar Square, where our reporter Alice Porter is for us now. Alice, what's going on in Trafalgar Square?
Hi there. Well, of course, this annual celebration hasn't been able to take place over the last couple of years because of COVID, but it's now very much back in all force, and they say they're celebrating everything about what it is to be English and all the joys of England. So what does that mean? Well, of course, there is the mandatory fish and chips stall that is behind me. There's going to be some Morris dancers. I've seen the pearly kings and queens who've been walking around in their incredible outfits. And I think it's going to be a really nice opportunity for people to get out, wave some flags. I think you can probably see we've got red and white, so of course, the St. George's flag behind me. So it's a nice way of people who are in London. It's a free event to come out and enjoy and celebrate all things it is to be English.
Alice, I was rather disappointed. I was expecting a couple of flags of St. George on either cheek or something, on your forehead or something when you came on. Are people not turning up, with all the...
The afternoon is young. I could, I've heard there's a few drinks around. There's some local, beers and ale and all sort of. I think there's going to be a bit of a medieval sort of tradition.
You just needed to get your lipstick out your handbag, and you could have done it. You need to do that.
So who's going to be there today? Is the Mayor of London expected to attend the St. George's Day festivities in Trafalgar Square?
We haven't heard that, but yes, this has been organised by City Hall, and of course there are a number of celebrations that usually take place with different patron saints. I mean, I have to say, sadly, I do feel there hasn't had quite the turnout that you normally get on St. Paddy's Day, which of course is when you see normally a lot more people with a lot more booze. However, I do think I can hear some of the music starting up behind me. We're going to have some people performing on stage in different dances, and it's really nice to have an event that's free right in the centre of London.
We need to get ourselves down there, don't we?
Certainly.
Do you not?
I'll have my cross on.
Is that what you... Alice, we're expecting big things. We want you to have a big St. George's Day flag on your face, and we want pictures.
Proof. He just wants the proof. That's all he wants the pictures for. Proof. And we'll be showing them next week.
Alice, enjoy the festivities in Trafalgar Square. It looks as if the weather's good. So have a great day.
Yeah, and don't have a dip in the fountain behind you. Can't do that.
Can you not?
Anyway, Sir Tony Blair has this week said 70% of young people should be in higher education by 2040 in a bid to tackle UK's productivity crisis.
The former Prime Minister said the increase was necessary in order to keep up with high innovation economies around the world, with some predicting the policy could see economic growth bolstered by up to 5% over a generation.
Well, joining us now to discuss this is Tom Richmond, the director of the education think tank EDSK. Now, my question is, who's going to benefit from this change?
It's a very good question. And I think that comes down to the kind of courses that people are going to embark on. I mean, Tony Blair is simply saying we're going to put more young people through the higher education system, be that universities or colleges. I don't think that really tells us very much at all, because if you have, say, 50,000 more young people going into medicine and engineering, well, that's clearly very different from saying we're going to have 50,000 more people go into subjects like leisure studies and creative arts, where young people come out earning less. They're less likely to get a well-paid job, and so they're less likely to contribute more back to the economy in terms of tax and productivity. So I think Tony Blair setting a high-level target is a nice ambition, but unless we know what these young people are actually going to be doing, I think that leaves us with quite a lot of question marks.
And that's why I asked who was going to benefit this. Is it the lecturers, and they'll have a job and you can have more? Is it the buildings that you're going to keep afloat and keep heated? Or is it you're going to, in a way, disguise the youth unemployment figures? But actually, we don't need to do that because we've got 1.3 million vacancies in the job market. So really, when I speak to young people, what they're talking about, they want a faster path to earn, not a slower path to debt. So we're talking about choice and speed.
Yeah, indeed. And if you look at the latest data from the Office for National Statistics, 43% of recent university graduates are now working in non-graduate jobs. So we've got over 4 in 10 young people who do complete a full degree who are not going on to then go into jobs where they actually use that degree. So that's why the government is absolutely right in the last few years to talk about apprenticeships a lot more. They're right to talk about degree apprenticeships, where you can get a degree through an apprenticeship and end up with no student loan debt as well. And so when Tony Blair talks about 70% of young people going to higher education, if that means lots more people doing degree apprenticeships and getting great degrees and great jobs, I think I'd be very supportive of that. But if it just means more young people doing very expensive 3-year full-time degrees and they end up £50,000 in debt at the end of it, I'd be pretty sceptical about whether that's really going to help our economy very much.
I mean, Tom, what's the evidence for that this would increase productivity? I don't understand this. I mean, I studied history and politics at university, which most people might, with some justification, say is a completely worthless and pointless degree. I mean, I'm not entirely sure how having more people studying history and politics and being indoctrinated with Black Lives Matter is going to improve productivity in the economy. What's the evidence for it doing that?
Yeah, so the Tony Blair's report came out this week, and having looked through it, he does talk about the idea that people who get trained at higher levels, and of course, university degree is one way, but not the only way you can do that. But if you go and study at higher levels, you can pick up extra skills, not just the extra knowledge. So your ability to do lots of project work, teamwork. There is some parts of university degrees in particular, and certainly apprenticeships, that do make you more employable. But again, you can't really generalize across different degrees. It's very hard to compare a degree in engineering to your history and politics degree to then say, well, which one's going to add more value? And how do we know before a young person chooses a university degree, which one's going to add more value to them as well? How do parents know which one's going to add more value? And so again, setting high level targets is one thing, but unless you can really dig down underneath that and say, well, what are the actual skills and knowledge that young people are going to learn? Then I think it is very difficult to say with any confidence that our economy is going to benefit in the long run.
You see, the thing that I would imagine is that all that will happen is that degrees will become completely worthless to employers and the people who have got them alike. Because if everybody's got one, in effect, nobody's got one, and employers will stop even looking to see whether you've got a degree or not, because everybody's got one, and we're going to end up with people who sort of the idea of starting at the bottom and working your way up is going to become an alien concept to people, because they're going to think, well, I've got a degree, I've got so much debt, I want to start at the top, not start at the bottom and work my way up through the ranks. So I just don't see how practically it's going to have the impact that Tony Blair thinks it's going to have.
Yeah, indeed. And some graduate employers have already decided to start, if not lowering their requirements about whether you need to have a degree, but some employers have already said, we're going to start recruiting people even without looking at whether they have a degree, because they're not convinced. More and more employers, I think, are unconvinced that just by looking at whether someone has a university degree, that it really tells you very much. And this is why I think we're seeing some very exciting things like degree apprenticeships appearing, because as these are designed by employers, they can be so much more confident that you get a degree, but you also get the kind of skills and knowledge that they need. And so to me, again, We've got to think about what students and parents are going to make of all of this. And if all the government does is encourage more and more people to do very expensive full-time degrees and not necessarily get a good job at the end of it, I don't really think that's the right goal for this government or indeed any other government. But if they start talking more about apprenticeships, and like you say, people working their way up through a company, do a part-time degree, do a degree at your local college, you still get the degree at the end of it. You still get those high-level skills that Tony Blair's talking about, but you don't need to bury yourself £50,000 in debt, which inevitably you won't be able to pay off in many cases, even over the course of your whole career.
Tom, I've just got a quick question here. I work with pupils on a weekly basis doing career guidance, and I'm always amazed that lots of pupils don't actually know what they're doing in school. They don't realise that's a passage to get into work, and really they need to be focusing on what they do want to do when they leave school, not stay in education for longer and longer and actually delay and procrastinate getting into the workplace. So how is this 70% going to university going to help people figure out what career they want?
Yeah, so some of the feedback we've got in our research at EDSK from young people is that all their schools and colleges want to talk to them about is going to university. The university is indeed going to be a good option for a lot of them, but not all of them. And if we just say, well, we're not going to worry about careers advice anymore, we're just going to push more and more people, young people, closer to degrees, if not straight into degrees, without those breaks that you're talking about, without taking a bit of time out to go and get a job and then think about a degree afterwards, simply creating a conveyor belt of young people from school or college straight into a 3-year, full-time, expensive residential degree. That's not the right way to think about it. And I think a lot of young people are increasingly looking at the amount of debt they end up with and saying, was that really the right choice for me? Didn't I have any other options? So you're right, we've got to improve careers advice as much as we have to improve our higher education system.
Tom Richmond, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Now, it's taken aviation enthusiasts in East Lothian over 20 years to build a rare World War I plane, and it's finally set to fly.
The Sopwith 1-2 Stutter was only supposed to be built to go on show at the museum, but it's now fully operational. David Donaldson has this report.
This replica is one of only 6 left in the world and has taken 22 years of painstaking work to build. But the Sopwith Strutter is fuelled and is nearly ready to take to the skies. Mike Harper is chairman of the Aviation Preservation Society Scotland and feels it will be an emotional day.
We're not far away from getting her in the air. COVID, the pandemic, has been a big problem for us, as it has for everybody. It's knocked us back a couple of years, but we're still here. We're still getting on with the job, and we're not far away from finishing it. And there'll be a number of guys who are no longer with us, but will be with us in spirit. There's been a lot of people have given a lot to this project, and it will be a real achievement to see her take off for the first time.
Evan Pohl is the Strutter team leader and says the aircraft will need certain conditions in order for it to fly.
For the test flying, it'll need quite a large airfield. It'll not only need a large airfield, it'll need one with a grass strip in it, because these aircraft flew from grass strips. They didn't land on hard runways. They didn't have brakes. So you need grass and a tail skid to give it some sort of brake traction when you land on the grass.
All the people involved in the project are volunteers with a variety of different skills, and they have really been put to the test during a steep learning curve.
You're learning, in other words, as you go along. Because while the drawings tell you what you have to make, one thing they don't do is tell you how to make it. And that has been the learning process, is how to. And it's been how to make it, how to make ferrules, how to stress it, and so on. So really, it's been an absolutely wonderful, enjoyable learning exercise.
The amount of time and effort to get the Strutter flying has clearly been challenging, but the plane is of great historical importance.
One of the main reasons that we decided to build her was that this type of aircraft was involved in the very first successful takeoffs and landings from a flat top, and it was done just outside, just up offshore here on the Firth of Forth. It was done by a chap called Richard Bell Davis, and he flew from RAF Turnhouse, and he found the HMS Argus in the middle of the Forth, and he landed successfully. He took off successfully, and he did that several times. It had been done before, but it hadn't been done successfully. This was the first time.
No date has been set for the test run for the Strutter, but it won't be long before this plane is airborne. David Donaldson, GB News.
We'll just finish with some GB views. Gary says, you say that doctors are only working 3 days a week and you wonder what they're doing the rest of the week. I think they're doing private work where they can get a lot more money.
Oh, controversial. But anyway, that's it from us today. We will be back next week at the same time. Don't forget, you've got Alistair, Stewart and friends, and that's all happening after the weather.
Good morning, I'm Stephen Keats with your latest Met Office weekend forecast. It's going to be quite a windy weekend across much of the UK. Mostly dry across the northern half of the country, but an increasing likelihood of seeing some showers the further south you are. And that's because we're closer to this area of low pressure which will be spiralling around across France and the Bay of Biscay through Saturday and Sunday, eventually pushing up the risk of some showers into southern Britain. Further north though, we're close to this high pressure, which means things are set fair, but in between though, we'll have this brisk and gusty easterly wind. So quite a bit of cloud out there across the southern half of Britain this morning. 1 or 2 showers initially, these tended to fade away, and then with a bit of daytime heating, a bit of energy injected into the atmosphere, a few more showers breaking out. So parts of Wales, the southwest Midlands, later into southwest England, the odd heavy, possibly thundery shower possible here. Elsewhere though, quite a bit of sunshine away from the far north of Scotland where it's rather grey and misty and quite cool, as it will be along those North Sea coasts. But inland and with some shelter from that wind, pleasantly warm. Now those showers across southwest England this evening will tend to pull away, only to be replaced by another clutch of showers moving back into the southeast, and these will work their way westwards through the English Channel and southern counties of England overnight. Elsewhere though, it's largely dry, it's largely clear. That's aside from a few areas of cloud coming into some eastern coast, and it's still quite grey and misty across the north of Scotland. Chilly in the countryside, particularly where we've got a bit of shelter from the breeze, but on the whole not desperately cold to take us into Sunday. So early showers clearing away from southwest England first thing on Sunday morning, and then a lot of dry weather around once again through Sunday. Sunny spells developing quite widely. The odd shower for northern England, southern Scotland. Still quite grey and misty for the far north of Scotland, but the majority of Scotland will see a fine day. And in the sunshine, and particularly if you're out of that breeze, 17 or 18 Celsius is quite possible. Cooler along some North Sea coasts. Now high pressure stays in charge, increasingly so into the new week, which means a lot of dry weather around, variable, at times large amounts of cloud, so it won't be wall-to-wall sunshine. But in that sunshine, still pleasantly warm. Take care.
Join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain every Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m. A news hour that comes with a trigger warning. Scorching hot opinion with prominent guests saying the unsayable and a little bit of weekend fun thrown in. Unlike other broadcasters, I won't be forgetting what the B in our name stands for. So howie in for Real Britain Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on